Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Wheel of Mind, a character point of view reread podcast dedicated to Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time series. This season, we are taking a deep dive into Moiraine's point of view. I'm Lajara Dane of the White Aja.
And I'm Giskell and a scholar from Ilion. Now, I want to give you a quick spoiler warning. We often can and do talk about events from any of the 15 books. We may even throw in references to other series entirely from other people, other authors. But just be prepared for spoilers at any time. So if you have not read the entire series, we recommend you do that before listening to these podcasts. Now, today we're here to discuss chapters 19 and 21 from New Spring. And Lajara, would you please start us off with chapter 19?
Sure, thank you. This chapter opens, well, let me back up. Chapter 19 is called Pond Water. The chapter opens on Moiraine as she's creeping out of the inn. So remember in the last chapter, she was just grabbing her stuff, not even her saddlebags, just what she could fit in her cloak and heading out of the room. So this chapter opens on her creeping out of the inn. It's raining and she kind of wishes she could block it with a weave, but that would draw too much attention. She generously tipped the stable hand who saddled and readied her horse Arrow. Not only did she leave her saddlebags, like in the last chapter, but she leaves the entire pack horse too. So as far as anyone can tell, she's just going for a morning ride and won't be considered missing until evening. The streets should be empty at this pre-dawn hour. People in the borderlands don't tend to mill about or even go out at night if they can help it, except for the night watch and the lamplighters, because this close to the blight, Murdral are a common threat. So they banish the shadows as best they can throughout the night in borderland cities. When she reached the western gates, she notices she's not the only one out, though, which is, as I said, pretty unusual. A couple of Malkieri men and an Arafellan man seem eager to get through the gate, and she believes this Arafellan man with the braids is the same one she saw leaving the inn after speaking to an Aes Sedai she couldn't identify just the night before. She kept an eye on those three since they seem to be traveling the same direction while she's on her way to Chachin. She stopped at a village where everyone is armed, as is the case throughout the borderlands, but she's still kind of getting used to seeing this. She buys a little bit of food and asks about the next woman on her list, Aveen Sahara. Doesn't get any leads there. She keeps thinking about how to approach these three men that she believes might be dark friends. She could well be vulnerable to them without using the power, but it would be incredibly easy for someone to track her if she did use the power. So she decides not to approach just yet, until she sees the men stop and split up to make camp. Moiraine follows the younger Malkieri, who left a pretty sloppy trail, in her opinion. So she has some small amount of tracking skills and notices that this guy just kind of left broken twigs and branches and stuff all over the place. He appears to be sitting very still, just kind of staring out over a pond after he sets up part of the camp. So Moiraine decides to sneak up and grab his sword to get him in a kind of a surprised and more vulnerable position so that she has a little bit of power and leverage to ask questions before his companions return. Trying to figure out what they're doing, why they're going to Chachin and all of that. She channels his sword from his sheath, but he catches it and her, and he throws her over his shoulder into the nearby pond. He does extend a hand to help her up and advises her not to separate a man from his sword. She expects an apology that she doesn't get, and he offers to hang up blankets and build a fire so she can dry off and get dressed. She channeled herself dry, but she stayed behind the blankets long enough to brush her hair out nicely and kind of have more of a look of dignity about her by the time the other men arrive, and to just warm up, enjoy being by the fire, and to hide the fact that she had channeled herself dry. The men's companions arrive. Bukama is the older Malkieri, and he suggests that he knew she was following them. He says something to Lan about, oh, did she catch up to you, or did you confront her or something? Moiraine feels foolish about the fact that she didn't realize they were obviously luring her towards them. And then Rhine, who's the Arafellan, mentions wanting to peep in on Moiraine naked, but Lan reminds him of their honor and how, does a woman need to protect herself from your eyes? They have this tension between them, Rhine and Lan, so Bukama moderates a kind of duel between them, it looks like. They just sort of pull out their sword and put it to the other man's throat, and Bukama keeps calling any of these quick draws, more of them for Rhine than for Lan. Moiraine tries to soak in everything she can, watching these games and their interactions and the way that they speak, realizing that she doesn't know a lot about Malkiri culture, so she's trying to remember what little she has learned. And when she does, she claims the right of a woman alone, stating her intent to travel to Chachin and asking for their protection. She even pays them silver, but they don't seem very pleased with the money, and maybe it's because the coins are Tarvalin marks. Throughout the evening, Moiraine has some nice flirty chats with Rhine, but when she asks him why they're going to Chachin, he looks sad and says a man has to die somewhere. Then he heads off to bed. Moiraine wards each of the men so she can be aware if they're trying to make even the slightest movement towards her to harm her, but that also means that it keeps her awake as well every time they turn around. Bukama says something to Lan that she didn't quite catch, but she did hear Lan's reply. I'd sooner trust an Aes Sedai. Moiraine absolutely loses her cool. She cannot handle being insulted like this. First, a woman of her station got no apology for being thrown into a pond, and now she hears Aes Sedai insulted in that way. So she weaves a sort of cyclone with some weaves of air, water, and a little bit of earth thrown in to basically throw the pond onto Lan to get him back. Lan did not react to her satisfaction, though. It didn't even knock him off of his feet. The three men start to ready themselves to fight Shadow Spawn, and she's frustrated that they didn't realize this threat actually came from her. So she reveals her status to them. Rhine sounds a little fearful. Bukama is kind of bowing and being a lot more respectful. Lan doesn't really change his behavior at all. He just stays wet out of spite. Doesn't want to look cowed in any way. And Moiraine reflected, if that was humility, kings were the most humble men on earth. She reset the weaves about the three men and reflected on how they did not even ask why she was following them. She ruminated about how Lan was physically still standing after her attack, and she's not happy with that, and also thought about her attraction to Rhine. And these are the things going through her head as she goes to sleep. So thus ends chapter 19. And then I have a brief synopsis of chapter 20 called Breakfast in Manala. It's from Lan's perspective, so we're not covering it in depth. In it, Moiraine introduces herself as Lady Alice. Lan overhears her questioning about Aveen Sahara, and he offers to help her in her search. And then we move on to chapter 21.
Oh man, I love that chapter. That's a good one. The just the byplay here between Lan and Moiraine. These are two people who both have a lot of pride. You know, she reflects on him that if this is humility, then kings have humility, and yet she's exhibiting the same kinds of pride and stubbornness, and doesn't see that in herself. And I find that just kind of I enjoy it because it's not like flirty. It's not like two lovers, but yet you see this interplay between these people that there is a battle of wills that they both enjoy, though they do not really like each other's presence at this time. And I love the I don't know, kind of the tension of it.
Yeah, these chapters are really funny, and there's a lot of that dramatic irony, like you said, of neither of them realizing that the other that they don't see their own qualities in the other one, but they
Right, right.
certainly have those. They're
Yes,
very strong personalities, and you're seeing those clash here. Moiraine actually reminds me a lot of Nynaeve in both of these chapters, and because Nynaeve has a lot of this dramatic irony as well, where she will shout at people to tell them to stop shouting.
yes, yes.
And so this is the same thing, not directly so much in either of their words, but in their actions. And Moiraine is just so insulted and really digs her heels in. She's so defensive. It is funny. I mean, it's played for comedy, but it's interesting how sloppy she gets, like how much she lets this situation get to her.
Right.
She has only been a few months from her shawl test, but during the test, you have to remain so calm during all kinds of threats and all kinds of embarrassments. It seems like she would have a little more street smarts by now. I don't know. She thinks I don't know why she thinks it's like her business at all to start following these men. Maybe she thinks one of them might be a dark friend, I guess, but I
Right.
don't
Yes,
know.
yes. That little bit of thought, which I thought was funny, are these brigands? Are they dark friends?
Hmm.
Which, of course, is going to be on your mind after the conversation the day before with Siouan.
Yeah.
When you realize you can't trust anybody except
Yeah,
Siouan, nobody else. So yeah, of course, that's going to cross your mind. But
totally.
she didn't really, like, she thought about it, but she didn't treat them as though they might be. She's like, oh, I got this curiosity. I wonder where they're going. Well, they're headed down the same road I am, so I'm going to stay behind them. Now, I'm never going to get close enough that they can acknowledge me or talk to me, but I'm never going to lose sight of them either.
Hmm.
Um,
And she seems
and
to think that they wouldn't notice that. She's surprised
right,
when she
exactly,
finds out that they did.
exactly. Yeah, when Bacama and Ryan come back into the little camp there by the pond after she's been pulled out of the pond and kind of dried off, and she's thinking about that. Well, these three men set this up in order to confront me. What did three men have to fear from one woman traveling alone? How strange.
Yeah.
Why would this have been a concern of theirs? You couldn't see it from their point of view. They're being followed. Maybe they've got other things going on in their life. Maybe there are people out after them.
Hmm.
Of course, we know a little of Land's backstory, but very little. And that's one of the things that makes him intriguing is you know bits and pieces about Land, but you never really see the whole man, even throughout the entire series.
Yeah.
There's always that little air of mystery that compels you to want to know more about him.
Hmm.
Um, and of course, we see that in this too. Yeah, she's you know cannot see things from their point of view or from his point of view.
No, not at
Okay,
all.
it looks like I'm being nosy and following these guys. Maybe they think they've got something to fear from me. Even the thing where she comes up behind him, and I love this. When he's sitting at the pond, and I know we're telling this out of order, but that's fine. Um, as he's sitting over the pond, she comes up behind him, sneaks up behind him, and she thinks it'll kind of put him a little bit of a disadvantage if he sees
Hmm.
her with her belt knife and his sword. You know, to kind of
Hmm.
make him feel a little more defenseless. And there's a little hummock of ground there that she stands up on to kind of alleviate the disparaging difference in their heights because she thinks about how tall he is. And she's still so self-conscious about being short
Hmm.
that she does this at every turn. And even in chapter 20, when he kind of confronts her about something, and again, it's told from his point of view, and he's like, "Is she standing on her tiptoes?" So it's like this is
Uh-huh.
the constant thing with her about her height, and I find it funny, and yet it makes her so much more human, which you
Hmm.
want your characters to be.
Yeah.
You don't want someone in the story to seem so otherworldly that you can't relate to them. Everybody's got something that kind of makes you defensive. Everybody has something that makes you feel sometimes inferior, and you try to alleviate that or work around that. And everybody has things, their own blind spots, their own bits of
Yeah.
pride that they don't really see in themselves, and everybody else does. That's some of the awesome things about these stories is the characters are so awesomely real, and you can relate to most of them, except for those that are so evil, the Forsaken, and some of those that you
Hmm.
really can't relate to. But most of others you can. And little things like when he reaches down to give her a hand out of the pond, and she kind of grabs his wrist with both of her hands and pulls with all her might. She's going to pull him in the water
Oh,
to kind of
yeah.
teach him a lesson. And he
Hmm.
just lifts her up out of the water, turns with one hand, and sets her on the ground. And like he didn't even notice.
Hmm.
Like, okay, it's so far. I didn't. I'm not even going to show you that I noticed you doing that.
Yeah.
It's almost like a man would treat a child for the same reason, to frustrate them, to kind of tease them in a sense without saying anything, just with your actions. And he just does this, and he walks off like he did nothing. Uh,
Hmm.
and I find it so funny and so awesome.
Yeah. And she continues to get insulted by each tiny little time that she tries to assert herself or really try to dominate him in some way and he
Yes.
doesn't react.
Hmm.
She gets increasingly more insulted every time. She's so defensive that she really misses a lot. I mean,
Yes.
she's really just as naive as Catswain was warning her that she was last
Exactly.
last chapter or last couple of chapters.
Yeah.
And she's she doesn't really seem to question why Borderlanders would have left such a sloppy trail. She's like, oh, wow, I can I can track him. He stumbled through here
Right.
like a child.
I am so clever.
I know. And she seems a little too quick to use the power to solve a problem. That's the first thing that she goes to as a defense, which is,
Yes.
I mean, that's how the tower trains people, which we've gone through that. I mean, the tests are to get people to react quickly in very dangerous environments. So I get it, but it also was not ever really the right call to make here, I feel like.
Right. Right.
So that's what we're going to see. I guess I'm maybe foreshadowing too much about the upcoming chapters with talking
No.
about using the power a lot. But um, yeah, I feel like part of the reason, not only are her buttons getting pushed specifically, and that's why she has all these blind spots, but I think she also, because of tower training, where women are kind of locked away, literally in the tower, for
Yes.
much of their adolescent and young adult years, they don't get a lot of experience interacting with men. And so she is kind of at a disadvantage here because I sort of see men as this kind of other species that they don't deign to
Right.
relate to oftentimes, unless they're agreeing, really, a lot of the time.
Mhm.
And so I think, I'm concerned with how sloppy she just kind of ran into this sort of trap. And I'm concerned for her because of Ryan sort of making eyes at her. So when she gets to know them in the evening, he is sort of, laughing at all the appropriate points in the story. Or am I getting ahead of myself? Is that in the next
No.
chapter?
No. It's
Okay.
a little of it all sprinkled all through here. That
Yeah, so she's
she's
charmed
so
by Ryan, and that
right.
concerns me that maybe she should be a little more on guard about that. But I think, sex segregated schooling like this during such formative years when people would typically be exploring relationships and getting to learn more about the opposite sex, she's not had those opportunities,
Right.
and she's not used to men seeing her as attractive, trying to seduce her. So yeah, I'm scared for her. Cat Swain
Right.
had some good points last time. She
Yeah.
said them in the worst way possible, but yeah.
And even despite the way he wanted to kind of go in and take a peek through the blankets and things like that, she doesn't perceive him as leering and ogling the way she has so many other men throughout, up to this point in the story. If a
Mhm.
man looks at her, oh, he's ogling her. If he looks at her, smiles, he's leering at her,
Mhm.
and it's so unwanted. But of course, she does find him cute, and she says that to herself in her own mind that
Mhm.
that she finds Ryan cute, and so and let's face it, people love attention.
Yeah.
That's part of human nature. And as you said, she should have been on guard against that. Yet, yeah, she's just showing her oh, inexperience. I guess would be the best word I could think of. She's
Yeah,
showing
I
her
think so.
inexperience in this, and how she should be watching a little more closely. And as well, not only is she constantly perceiving these threats against her authority and them quote unquote looking down on her, my words not hers. um, she's continually insulted by them because they don't react the way she wants them to react,
Mhm.
and yet she is continually insulting them by her actions
Yeah.
simply because she doesn't know much about the Malkiri ways, customs. What little she did know was a little history about Malkiri, but she knew that the country was gone. It was consumed by the blight. And so I guess they hadn't bothered to spend a lot of time on knowing Malkiri customs and background.
Mhm.
And so, by claiming the right of a woman alone and then offering the money, she's just like slapping them in the face.
Yeah.
And she doesn't know that. And she constantly does things like that with them throughout her interactions with them that just show how naive she is in dealing with them. And you wonder how she got so far as to, for us to catch up with her in Kowloon. What other misadventures did she have along the
Right?
way, or is she a little closer to home and therefore able to adapt better? We don't know, but
Yeah. The road must have been so much safer and uneventful.
yes, yes, but because she has not learned much up to this point, at least in dealing with people.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. That is about all I had about this chapter. Do you have anything else?
No, I think we pretty much run that one out. I enjoyed
Okay.
talking about it. So on to chapter 21. Now, course, she gave us the recap of chapter 20, which felt like it was important, but there weren't a lot of big events there. And chapter 21, called Some Tricks of the Power, starts up. It's still from Land's point of view. So we're not going to break it down to that, that degree, but there are a few things that happen that we felt like were important. It begins with them suffering through two different storms while they're traveling. But Moraine creates a shield using the power that stops the rain and the hailstones, because there were some very big hailstones in these storms. Then they're waylaid by these 50 bandits, 50 or so, on the road. Uh, Moraine, of course, she puts thunder in her voice, literally using the power, blasts fire across the sky, and then Land threatens to go ahead and attack the bandits. The bandits knew they would overwhelm them, in spite of Moraine's power, in spite of how dangerous that Land and Moraine look. But they knew they would lose so many people on the way. Nobody wanted to be the first one. So, once Land gives a threat, the bandits kind of melt away. And then we find out that Moraine has been kind of messing with Land, tormenting him at night by doing little pranks, just as she and Siwan had been prone to do. She used the power to put sand in his clothes one night. She used the power to have ants crawl into underneath his clothes and is biting him all at once, simultaneously. Then she found some blister weed near their camp. She used that. We assume that's similar to poison ivy or something in our turn of the wheel. But when Moraine's point of view picks up, midway through chapter 21, we find out it's boring traveling with these three silent companions. Moraine could not get them to tell her anything about themselves, even after spending time telling the stories of herself growing up, trying to kind of lure them into conversation. They revealed little in their expressions, and they deflected questions as well as any Aes Sedai. She finally did locate Avina Sahira, the woman she'd been looking for, in the town of Ravinda. Avina had been building a new inn in the town with the bounty money she'd received and was calling it the White Tower. The child she had was her 10th child. He was born a month too early to be the dragon reborn. So Moraine is understandably disappointed. So they continue their journey to Chachin. Moraine toys with the idea of setting wasps onto Land that night, but wonders if he's allergic to them. So she asks him, and as he turns to answer, suddenly his right shoulder sprouts an arrow. Now, Moraine quickly weaves a shield of air around Land, then one for herself, and using her heightened perception by holding the power, she spots an archer in the woods and quickly ties him up in a weave, not realizing just that time Ryan and Bukama had also seen him and had just fired their arrows at him. So she releases the weave as the archer falls to the ground with 2 arrows in him. Land knows the man is Kenidron, who, as he lay dying, admits that he did it for the gold, and that he, and he being having quotes around it, said to, again, quotes, kill her first, end quote. He dies before Moraine can heal him, so she searches the body for clues, hoping to see a letter from a Master Gorthanes. Ryan and Bukama quickly and quietly break the arrow and remove it from Land's shoulder, and Moraine offers to heal him. Land is hesitant at first, but then allows it. He spasms and draws a breath from the use of the one power as his wound is gone, and older half-healed wounds that he'd had have their stitches fall free. Land gets up, he removes the bridle from the assassin's horse so that it can eat, and then sets it free. And this touch of kindness convinces Moraine not to use wasps on him that night, after all. That's ending chapter 21. Again, it's kind of a small chapter, but there's a lot of action here. It kind of catches you off guard. He instantly changes from Land's point of view to Moraine's point of view in the middle of the chapter, which is something we're not used to seeing, and then just hits us with nonstop action, kind of edge of your seat action.
Mm-hmm.
I almost had to go back and reread it when suddenly there's an arrow sticking out of Land's right shoulder.
Yeah.
Because you're not expecting it. You're so lighthearted, thinking of wasps. Hey, are you allergic to wasps? Ooh, there's an arrow sticking out of your shoulder. It catches you mid-sentence. Just, which of course is, I'm sure, the surprise he had too. And he turns to answer her, and suddenly, something he didn't expect there.
Yeah. I like that we see Moiraine get to flex her reflexes that she had to really hone during the shawl test.
Yes.
So we see her immediately neutralize the threat by wrapping the guy in flows of air. But I don't know that maybe we do in future chapters. I haven't read ahead in this read through yet, but maybe we don't really get to see her in this chapter deal with the fact that she has just been accessory to an extrajudicial execution. So she does think, wow, I really would not have done that if I had known they were about to shoot him. Maybe I would have helped keep him tied up until we could take him somewhere and, take him to a local magistrate of some kind.
Right.
So she was not happy with being included in that unknowingly.
Right. In fact, they did kind of hint at that when she wanted to heal him.
Oh,
said,
yeah.
Get the arrows out of him so I can heal him. And Buchanan was like, are you so ready to see a hanging? They knew that would be the end result, but then the man died anyways before they could heal him. But when the arrows strike him, when Ryan and Buchanan, they're so fast, she didn't expect them to shoot that fast. When their arrows strike him, and she's holding him with these weaves, she kind of, I think if I read it correctly, she kind of gasped or groaned, because that came very close to the edge of the oaths, that you will not use the power to kill someone or create a weapon for a man to use to kill another. And here she was basically had this guy trussed up and couldn't move while 2 arrows struck him.
Mm-hmm.
It was unintentional. That's probably the only thing that saved her.
Yeah.
But it was traumatic to her in that regard. And you're right, it doesn't show that she's had time to process this. She notes it, but there are things that happen in the spur of the moment that later you have some sleepless nights as you kind of process and work through those things.
Yeah.
And in my imagination, I can picture her taking time to deal with those things.
Right. I think that's I think it shows just how quick this chapter is, like you were saying. So much of it happens so fast. Before you know it, Lan's got the arrow in him. Before you know it, this guy's dead.
Right.
So yeah, she hasn't had time to deal with it. You're right. I'm curious to see if it comes up again in future chapters. I can't remember if it does, but it just seems like a lot of characters in miniseries have to go through this first kill, and she hasn't, intentionally killed someone because she physically couldn't with the oaths, but this is about as close as you can get.
Right.
So
well, I mean, if her
she's growing up fast now.
We knew she could. It's one of those things that that could happen, but at the same time, it's not something you go looking for. And you're right. In many series, you'll read where people process this, they deal with it. In many others, it's treated kind of blindly. Oh, he's dead, and they move on. That's always something that's bothered me. And even many movies, they'll lose a companion, someone near them will die, and everyone just moves on with their life.
Yeah, nobody's like throwing up and sleepless nights and crying, and
unable to function correctly for a week because your brain is just in shock. And those are the things that people go through in real life when they have these sudden things happen. Well, I guess I should rephrase that. Those are the things that most people go through or experience to some degree. You deal with a moment, and you have these times of kind of shock as the brain is trying to process this, as you're learning to come to terms with it, whether you've taken a life or come close to it, or someone very close to you has lost their life. And it's not something you just, okay, well, we'll get up tomorrow and here's my day, and I'm going to cook some food. You can't just go through the motions as if nothing happened. And it doesn't show this with her, but we do kind of get that sense. Yeah, she's kind of compartmentalized this away, and she's going to have to deal with it. Now, again, that may be a little more my imagination, but that's kind of how I see it. I like that she does react instinctively. As soon as she sees the arrow, she instantly, it's talked about just like in the testing for the shawl. She just throws these weeds out as fast as she can, and she surrounds Lan with a shield.
Yeah.
And then thinks to put one around herself. It's very distinct that, kind of, why did I do it in that order? Just had this random thought as she's doing it. But that was her instinct. And I can only assume to put one around Lan because he was the one who had an arrow in him. The only thing you can imagine, he might get another one if I don't do something quickly. and then, oh, my back is itching here. Let me get one around me too.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't think it's that she cares that much for him. I think it's just in the immediate thing. He's injured. Oh, let's protect him. All right, now let's protect me. That
Hmm.
she did it that way without thinking about it, rather than doing it in reverse. Protect me so I can protect others. Um, I think part of that is, I believe Cad Swain hit the nail on the head in the previous uh, episode we had, where she informed Moraine that shawl does not make you invincible like
Hmm.
you think it does. I'm paraphrasing, but that's kind of Moraine's point of view here with the 50 bandits. She acted like, even Bukama and them, they were kind of incredulous, that she acted like she could have taken them on by herself. She really thought she could. She thought she was that tough, that invincible. Um,
Yeah, she needs to quit flaunting her Aes Sedai status everywhere like this. It's making me nervous for
right.
her. I know we're towards the
Yeah.
end of the book, and I know she's going to be okay, but I really feel the tension.
Yeah. As well as should. Uh, I'm sure there are not many Aes Sedai who've left the tower when they're this young and inexperienced without traveling with another sister, just for this reason. How
Hmm.
many in history have gone out when they're very green, quote unquote, not referencing the Aja, but just their newness to this, and never come back
Mm.
because they make these simple mistakes, and they become a target. They make themselves a target. As well, she is kind of looking for this letter, hoping it, hope, she says, too much to hope for, I think, to find this letter by Master Gorthanes. They were instructed to, quote unquote, kill her first. Whoever
Yes.
sent the assassin knew that she was the most dangerous one of the lot, but he knew Lan, so he made the assumption Lan is going to be the most dangerous one of the lot. He's the one you kill first.
Which is
Uh,
normally a safe assumption if you know
yes,
Lan. That
yeah.
made sense.
I would say really either one of them. They're
Yeah.
they're both deadly in their own right, in their
Oh,
own
right,
way.
right. But of course, he didn't know that about
He
her.
did not
So
know
he's
that.
like, oh, this has really changed the game if that's Lan.
Right.
I do have to take him out first.
Yeah. And yeah, like you said, typically that would have been good, and the arrow would have pierced his heart, except she got
Mm.
distracted by a wasp, thought about putting one in his bed, wanted to know if he's allergic first, asked him a question, and he turns to answer her. That saved
Yeah.
his life. And I think it's a pretty good ending to chapter 21, that her point of view here kind of begins, in a sense, with the wasps, or this attack begins with her thoughts of the wasps and ends with it at the end of the chapter.
Oh,
So
yeah, it does. I forgot about the parallelism there.
yeah, any other thoughts on this chapter?
Yeah, I think she's taking the least charitable possible interpretation of Lan's behavior specifically. um, which is just annoying. I mean, it is funny, but like after a couple of chapters of this, I'm like, oh, come on already. Can you just talk to each other, be a little more direct? I mean, I know you're both defensive because you both have different secretive stuff going on, so I get it, but it's frustrating and funny to read at the same time.
Right. Yeah. How long does it take you to figure out he's not going to be broken?
Yeah.
He might learn to bend a little if you treat him with respect, but he's not going to be pushed. He's not going to be broken. Ooh, I wonder if that was very good training for Moraine, who will later have to deal with Rand, who is equally as stubborn, if not more so.
Yeah. It's also, I mean, it's probably been good training for Lan all these years because he will have to continue to deal with a very stubborn woman in his future
Yes,
after
yes,
Moraine. So,
right. Well, many years with her, and then many years afterward. You're right.
yes. So
Um,
yeah, he's got a lot of prep for Nynaeve because her Moraine's behavior in these chapters reminded me so much of her.
yes, yes.
But yeah, no, that's a good point. I never thought of this dealing with this stubbornness, preparing Moiraine to deal with Rand, because now, after so much time with Lan, she has figured out with this kind of person, you can't push them to do anything. You need to
Right,
back off. You need to sort of make them feel like it was their idea to do what you want them to do.
right.
Um, yeah, I never really thought about that, but yeah, this is the beginning of that. It's but it is part of something we see throughout the series. We see a lot of these types of misunderstandings between men and women,
Yes,
really just kind of constantly. I mean, we see it with our Emmons Field folks early in the chapter, and we primarily see this with our really young folks, and then some people who've been, many of the Aes Sedai who are much older, they have been shut off from really dealing with men, and they kind of see non-channelers as maybe below them. So I guess that's a little different as well. But that's where we mostly see these kind of gender war type things. So they use specific cultural differences as well. It's not just a men versus women thing in these chapters. Jordan kind of uses cultural differences between Moiraine and the Borderlanders that makes sort of a caricature of a stereotypical broken down line of communication across genders in many heterosexual relationships. So we see men and women just kind of seeing each other as alien species they can't ever hope to fully understand. And I think the reason that is in these books a lot is not really so much because Robert Jordan viewed gender that way, but because he thought that some of the greatest accomplishments would be done when people work together. And he wanted to show what a broken world it was where people were not communicating across gender lines and not working together.
Right.
So yeah, it's played for comedy here, but it does bug me a little bit because I get that part of the message of the series is men and women need to work together. When we restore Saidin and we allow Saidin and Saidar to work together, some of the greatest things can be done, but we don't actually see a lot of our characters on an individual level learn their lessons about communicating across gender lines.
Right.
So they don't often get that chance to see something from another person's perspective. So later, I think one of the few exceptions might be when one of the Red Sisters bonds one of the Ashaman, Andral, the guy who makes the portals.
Yeah.
And they mutually bond each other. And so we get a tiny taste of somebody actually really communicating, men and women understanding each other. But otherwise, I think the solution to this divide is we have a lot of characters paired off into heterosexual relationships at the very end of the series, and it feels like maybe that's something that was supposed to happen as a part of this like harmony overall between male and female energies in the universe. But the result ends up feeling a little bit unsatisfying to me because I see a lot of those pairings as feeling a little bit forced and not feeling like they had great chemistry, and they didn't come to a lot of these personal epiphanies. So like Moiraine and Tom felt a little bit out of nowhere on a reread. I'm getting into that one a little bit more. Siwan and Gareth Bryn was another one where I thought, I don't know, maybe there's people they could have been paired with better in the series. There's a lot of situations where you could see their romance build, but I don't know that I really felt it. I never empathized with either of them in those situations. Egwene and Gawain was another one of those. And I never felt the chemistry between Rand and Elaine, maybe a little bit with Avienda, and definitely with Min. So I guess he didn't hang out with Elaine much. And so I'm like, where did that even come from?
Yeah. See, I guess I saw that a little differently. I really saw a lot of chemistry between he and Elaine. But again, this is kind of may partly be the difference between the way men and women view relationships and view things. One last thing I have to add, and then I'll turn it back over to you to see what else you want to talk about, is in chapter 20, there's just one thing that just stood out at me as being so funny. All this time we've seen Moraine's, gosh, I'm grasping for a word again. Sorry, Lauren, I'm keeping you so busy on editing.
Oh, no.
All this time we've seen that Moiraine is very touchy about subjects of sex. She can't talk about it. There are things you talk about and the things you don't talk about. And yet in chapter 20, when they're in the inn eating during Belcom Festival, and they look up and they wonder where Moiraine has gone, and Ryan says, well, maybe she went to the privy. And Lan echoes Moraine's thoughts word for word. There are things you talk about, and there are things you don't talk about. He was so disgusted by the privy reference and how crude it was. And I just thought that's so funny that that he has his own mores that are so different from hers, but still you're so strict, and you're just kind of shocked when someone breaks that unspoken, unwritten rule of society. That's not something you talk about. And I just thought it was so funny because it's so different from her touch point, the thing that sets her off and just, she can't deal with it. Yet he's just as touchy about it.
That is funny. I didn't catch that. That's a nice little detail.
Yeah.
And I think we've been just gushing about the world building still. And my only last point is very minor and also about the world building. It's interesting to me that they know about allergies in this world.
Yes.
And it makes me curious more about the medicine, like what else is known about the body. I suppose that you don't have to do a lot of investigating when you use the type of healing that they do that just kind of fixes everything. So, but it just makes me wonder, because you have a lot of non-Aes Sedai who treat folks with herbs and stuff, and what kind of stuff do they know? I don't think we ever
Right.
get a lot of hints, but I thought it was fascinating that they knew about allergies and that people could
Yeah,
be
they
allergic to
knew. Yeah,
wasp stings.
yeah, they knew allergies were a thing. Yes, rather than just having a total misconception about what it was. Yeah,
Hmm.
that kind of went through my mind, not as detailed as you put it. Yeah, it did make me wonder, how did she know what an allergy was? And then I just skipped on because suddenly he had an arrow sticking out of his shoulder, and I forgot all about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that was something I caught, but I didn't dwell upon it like that. And I thought it was so cool, because it does make you wonder, because there are many of these societies where people have never seen an Aes Sedai, or they've seen them, they know what they are, but there's never one around when you need them. They don't
Right.
necessarily set up shop and have a storefront healing place where you come to a kind of a doctor's office, if you would.
Right.
So yeah, wonder what other kind of things they were able to do there medically, and how advanced that was compared to ah, how barbaric our customs were concerning medicine as much as 70 and 80 years ago.
Yeah. Right. Um, yeah, I think it would be interesting to learn more about that.
Well, I have really enjoyed this episode. It's been a fun one. A lot of interesting things here to look at and explore, and I hope all of our listeners are enjoying exploring these concepts with us. There's so many things to talk about in the Wheel of Time, and we're only taking a small chunk of it, a small point of view. But I'm glad there's a little bit of something that everybody can enjoy. I hope you all will join us next time for episode 9, which covers chapters 23 and 24, where our main characters experience some additional assassination attempts and they sneak into a palace.
You can now find us on Podbean, Stitcher, Google Play Podcasts, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. You can also stay updated on Twitter at Lajara Sedai, or subscribe to our YouTube channel of the same name. Tell them bye, Giskell.
Bye, Giskell.
I wrote notes about both chapters. My synopsis of chapter 19 is longer than the one for 21, but I could read
Yes.
for either of them. So do you have any preference?
No, I'm kind of the same. Actually, mine are pretty close in length.
Okay.
Do you mind if I take 21 then?
Yeah, because I think I had a little bit less, or maybe I was
Okay.
just rushing it towards the second half.
Yeah.
So if you have more on that one, then we'll do
Yeah.
it that way.
Well, I don't have more for it, but I have, a close amount. Now, one thing I did do is, and I want to ask you if you think I should do it as I get into chapter 21, or kind of for the after show or whatever. But there are several things that happen in chapter 20 and the first half of chapter 21 that are important to the story and to what happens to the continuity of it. I felt like
Yes.
they were from Land's point of view. So I thought about just mentioning that they happened, picking up with Moiraine's point of view. What do you think? Do you think
Yeah, I like that. I have a short. I wrote that just in case as well too. So
Yeah.
I have like a short 2-sentence or just 1-sentence synopsis of chapter 20, and then I have 3 or so sentences about Land's POV in 21. So
Right.
I thought when I get done with my 19, I might give my tiny synopsis of 20. And then if you had anything that you felt like was important to add, and then you could add it, and then you can start with, your short rundown of what happened for Land's POV, and then switching to Moiraine's. And I agree with you, because this is the first time where it's really been plot relevant to the chapters we're covering to cover other POVs. So yeah.
All right. That works for me.
Cool. Okay, are you ready then?
Yes, I am.
One.
Right. Very good. Okay, please edit that out. That sounded so condescending, and I did not mean
You're
it to.
fine.
All right, so here we go. Um, land. Okay, there are a few things that happened. We felt like made it important. Um, we find out that traveling with those three men is silent and boring. Uh, you okay? Are you still with me, Lajara?
Yes, very
Okay, there
sorry.
we go.
Was I making noise? I meant to mute it and just step out and grab something for a second. This will
I
go in the
heard that.
blooper reel.
Yes, it was. Okay. So anyway, quite all right. Um, so anyway, this chapter one picks up with Moraine's point of view about midway through. We later learn this from Carhinen. Okay, we'll cut that part out. We'll edit it, Master Gorthanes. I'm sorry. That's one of my notes to come back to later. When she did. But, oh, my goodness. I'm so sorry. I'm, I'm a blooper reel. I'm a walking blooper reel. Okay. So I'm going to go back a minute here. Okay.
We haven't seen her have enough time to deal with the fact that she was an accessory to this extrajudicial. Let me start that over. She's.
Man, Cat Swain hit it on the nail. Excuse me. We should, because how many young Aes Sedai, well, most, I would say, let me start over. And one thing that, I'm sorry, we kind of finished that. Yeah, that saved his life. And I like the way you talk about the like kind of the separation of men and women being a part of the brokenness of this world, especially in the beginning of it.
Mm-hmm.
But as well, part of that is I thought it was just a cultural thing. Like at Emmons Field, you had the
Mm-hmm.
men who were kind of in charge of the town, and then you had the women's council, and the men
Yeah.
kind of dealt with the men things, and the women kind of dealt with the women things. And there are many societies around the world that had kind of functioned that way.
Yeah.
Some where you almost have a, oh, of course this is going back to things that are not oh Lord, what's the word I'm trying to think of, it medieval. These
Mm.
go back to things pre-medieval times, but where you might have a lodge that all the men stayed, they lived there, and then you have another lodge with all the women, and they kind of dealt this the problems within the community together. And then of course, you had people who were married, and they might have their own place, but there were times in certain cultures where people were separated more by the sexes, and
Mm-hmm.
they handle the problems in different ways. They handle the raising of the children differently, and it's almost like the old African proverb that it takes a village to raise a child, because
Mm.
sometimes things were structured differently in some cultures, and I kind of consider this a microcosm of that
Yeah.
Jordan was just showing us. Uh, you know, in Emmons Field and some of these places where there was a somewhat of a separation between men and women in the way they handle things, and that it was intentional and that it was cultural.
Mm.
Of
Yeah.
course, part of it was because they felt like only a woman could handle all the women's problems and deal with the stubborn women in the community, and the
Mm-hmm.
only men could deal with the stubborn and dumb men in their community. Um, but at the same time, it kind of seemed to work. Um, I don't know. To me, maybe I kind of read it differently, but
Yeah, and I think it's totally possible to have a lot of different readings of this. I
yeah,
just saw when I read those kind of comments throughout the series of, okay, let's keep women's circle business as women's circle business, and you hear
right,
all the members, people like Nynaeve who were members of the women's circle saying things like, oh, men are wool-headed and you can't trust them
right,
to do this and that, um, and the men tend to find the women really like naggy and kind of henpecky.
right,
To me, that just, it reminds me of gender divides in the real world that end up kind of where people can underestimate each other across gender lines. So this
right,
tends to be in a lot of cultures in a way that gives men more hard power, where they have more decision making, but when women have more of like a softer power, and they kind of work behind the scenes or have more power in the household or something like that instead.
Right.
And we don't really see that in this series. We see actually quite a large variety across cultures of power between genders, like in the household
Yes.
and in the government, what that looks like. So that's interesting to me. It's one thing I like about this series. But
Yeah.
the Emmons Field dynamic always bothered me a little bit, because it seems like it can really be insulting to both genders in a way. Like, okay, the women kind of treat the men as being childlike and sort of infantilize them, and don't really feel like they're not capable of handling certain situations. And the men can kind of I don't know, instead of seeing the women as somebody they can work together with, like somebody who just kind of wants to bully them.
Right.
I don't know. It just seems like it could be a little insulting to both. And then a more
Yeah.
ideal world. I think it's interesting that the age of legends that people want to kind of aspire to, the utopia in this world, was
Yes.
a lot of gender equity.
Yes.
But then we don't see that later, obviously, after the breaking. The world
Right.
has had to kind of reorganize.
Right. Well, yeah, the entire thing of the male half of the source being tainted has really messed that up.
Yeah.
You don't have, gosh, you see, you can't even really say the word men or male as Sedai anymore, even though
Yeah.
that used to be a thing in the Age of Legends. They can't even conceive of that. That's why you had to call them the Ashamen,
Mm-hmm.
which just they couldn't even use the same words because of all of the cultural changes
Yeah.
since that time. But yeah, it's amazing how that changed the people, how it changed the culture. And there's so many little references to things like that when you look through, as well as just cultural differences. Um, and, I'm trying to figure out how to say it. Not just differences between men and women and in the perceived distance between them,
Mm-hmm.
but also the differences you see from one country to the next, or one culture to the next.
Yeah.
As in here with with Moraine's dealing with Lan and Bukama, um, she keeps insulting them because she's going counterculture to the way they expect women to act,
Mm-hmm.
and the role. Women have a much of a power over men in the borderlands.
Yeah.
There are certain things they can demand of men, and men, in some regards, are going to be submissive to them. In some regards, not. All because of the way they're taught and their ideas of honor. And it's something she doesn't get at all. So she's going totally against the grain with that.
Yeah.
And then you see, okay, and here you're gonna have to edit this part out because I can't remember uh, when Matt was with the woman in the town or the city where they were
Oh,
under
in
this
Ebu
Gotcha
Dar
control.
and the
Ebudar, thank you.
Queen, Thailand.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so let me go back. Uh, and then you get further in the story with Matt and Ebudar when he is kind of the consort of Queen Thailand, and she treats him like a toy. It's
Mm-hmm.
really disgusting, degrading the way she treats him.
Yeah,
Yet
it is.
it's because of the differences in the culture. She thinks he's playing coy. He's playing hard to get. He's luring her on. Yet the whole
Yeah.
time he's trying to run away from her and run away from a situation that he would have welcomed any other time. So
Mm-hmm.
I kind of love the changing dynamics from one culture to the next, and how that plays into the story. That it's not just one stayed solid dynamic, and nothing changes.
Yeah, certainly.
Um,
I really like seeing that variety across the cultures as well, because it's interesting when people asked Robert Jordan in interviews whether he thought he'd created a matriarchal world, because a lot of people saw, okay, the breaking of the world and the tainting of Sidene as a parallel to original sin. And they're thinking,
yes.
okay, in this world, kind of men committed original sin, so they have a different lower status in society
Oh,
because of that.
I,
But
I've never thought of that parallel. Yeah.
yeah, that I can't say that I came up with that for sure. I know I've read that elsewhere.
So what did he think about that idea?
Well, he said, I don't know that people actually brought up the original sin part to him directly. I would have to go do some Googling to find
No.
that out. But I know that when people asked him about gender balance or matriarchy in his world, he said he actually thought he wrote it to be fairly equal. That's how he viewed his world. And probably especially like the Andor centric viewpoints we start with, it's like sort of
Right.
an equal but different roles type of view.
Yeah.
So I think that But he took great care to try to show a lot of matriarchal societies as well, some patriarchal. We just see a big variety. And it's interesting because Malkir, like in all the borderland cultures, we think of them as being so martial and honor-based. And
Mhm.
I think it's fun how he changed that up, because we would normally think of that as just being hyper masculine values, and that
Right.
men would hold all the power here. But he does insert feminine power in ways that I think you wouldn't expect. And it's cool that this isn't just some copy paste of any kind of like martial culture that you would find in
Right.
any series.
Right. And this may be a little of an aside here, but in many of the border towns or borderland towns, um, I almost picture them as being, um, uh, I, I'm struggling for the words again here. I'm sorry. Um,
That's fine.
what was the word I used before for something back in the old days? That,
Oh, I don't know. You had said medieval.
medieval. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So I kind of perceive many of the borderland towns as being almost like medieval Japan.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think
Mhm.
because some of them have the top notch, the
Mhm.
Shinarans have the top knots, and just different things about the culture. Now, obviously, because of their size, land's towering height and everything, that they don't have many of the physical aspects of what we think of in our turning of the wheel as
Mhm.
being Japanese. Yet, with some of the things about their armor, some of the things about their swords, and about their styles of fighting are very much similar to what I think of as medieval Japanese society. Yet you don't have that strong patriarchal system. Even though it's a feudal society, you don't have serfs, who can just be treated and killed indiscriminately.
Mm.
Um, yeah, there is more equality among the genders and among the classes of people. But
Yeah.
there's some things that always kind of made me think of that, and perhaps that's just my perception, and it wasn't part of the story. But
No, I think
but
that's
I,
a
I
common
kind of
fan
picture that
perception.
that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess we try to find correlations between things we know and things we're familiar with, and the world as it was in that turning of the wheel.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
I think it helps us to, well, quick lesson about the mind here, since we're Wheel of Mind. It does
yes,
help us to, we remember something and learn something new easier when we can attach it to something we already know. So if we can
right,
attach to the things that Robert Jordan might have been hinting at, it helps us to really flesh that out. Even he does describe a lot of clothing and architecture in detail, but if you have trouble imagining that from the descriptions, you can kind of see that. I've heard a lot of people say that, the borderlands are coded as Asian, they're coded as Japanese. So you can still, it's almost like a shorthand you can use to import a lot of visuals already
right,
into your space you're imagining it in. So
right.
I think you were on the right track there. Honestly, I
Okay,
think he does that on purpose.
yeah, okay. I didn't know if it was just me or part of it, but I had always pictured that. Some of the coastal lands, like Ibu Dar, some of the others, I always pictured as being sort of Mediterranean.
Yeah.
And um, oh, what was another one? I had it on the tip of my tongue a moment ago. Um, and it
Well,
totally left me.
Kyrian's basically France in like the 18th century.
Yes,
So that's one.
yeah, and Andor is very much like Britain, except for
Yeah.
the fact they're always ruled by a queen, which I always thought was
Right.
interesting.
Yeah.
They never ruled by the king; they're ruled by the queen, and that dynasty is passed down from mother to daughter. It's just a cool thing, but it's like you take things we're familiar with and twist it a little bit and change it enough that you find similarities. Even like the name Ashaman for the male channelers,
Mhm.
it to me it comes from the Native American word shaman,
Mhm.
a magic user, someone who is a witch doctor, if you would. And so, and especially since the Ashaman are kind of looked down upon by the Aes Sedai and the female channelers, it kind of to me it kind of denotes that in the fact that they're
Mm.
channelers too, but they're looked down on with a certain class. And I'm assuming that was intentional, but it's an idea I like to play around with anyway.
Yeah.
Just the way we view the characters, the countries of the world as it was in that turning of the wheel, as compared to our own. We find those common things.
All right. I guess we have exhausted it so that I feel like we don't have much for after show unless you have anything,
Right,
because
right,
we put so much world building
right.
during
Well,
talking about chapter
I,
21.
I think some of that world building stuff, the male and female part, some of that might fit better in the after
Yeah,
show.
I'm gonna try and see if I
You-
can. Sometimes the flow
Yeah.
makes it difficult,
Oh
but
yeah.
yeah.
The privy reference, same
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. And I did it so in a previous episode where like we were talking about Maureen's point of view and how we like how
Hmm.
she's so observant and stuff.
Yes.
And then I went on about Perrin and you went on about how you like Perrin's point of view. I took out the Perrin part and put it at the end. So if I could do that, I
Okay.
could probably switch this one around a little bit.
Yeah. Maybe if you need to, or maybe even just copy some of it again. With
Yeah,
small
that's
part
true.
one
To
and
lead it
expanded
in.
part in the rest. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Um. But yeah, I just thought it was fun. Oh, and I've been getting better about reading chapters ahead of time, but I don't write my notes and type them up till after church Sunday morning. I don't know why. I have such an aversion. I sit there and think about I need to go and do that. I'll be ahead of it this
Yeah.
week, and I'm enjoying this so much. But it's like I cannot plan it a week in advance. If I did, I'd show up here and I'm like, Lan kindly offers to build her a fire.
So
It's
your
like it.
reactions can be more genuine that way. Yeah,
Right,
it makes
right.
sense that you want them to be
Uh,
fresh. And I don't think we
yeah,
have any problems doing that because we still have enough time to record and we
yeah,
still have genuine reactions. I tend to write up my notes pretty late as well. And I'm always
right.
afraid the last few weeks, especially, that I haven't had enough content. And then you and I always come up with
Yeah.
enough
Okay.
on the fly. So it works out.
Yeah. Well, I need to go back and listen to some more of these that you got because I noticed when we're recording, it seems like I do most of the talking, and I don't
Oh,
mean to do that, but I've
yeah.
just been taking over more and more, and it's like, yeah. But thank you for being on my podcast, Lajara. And it's not my intention, but I keep catching myself doing it. So today I was trying, like I was starting down the road, and I have such a great idea that just came to me then, and I would drop it. And I know you'll have to edit and smooth that out a little, but it's like I'm about to take over the whole conversation. I just back
Oh,
off a little.
yeah, I've
Uh,
tried. Well, I feel the same way sometimes, actually. So I
really?
haven't I
No.
haven't actually looked at the runtime, but I feel like when I do
Uh,
talk, sometimes I'll go on a big long spiel, and so it never
uh,
bothers me when you do.
okay.
And I think I kind of like that, especially because in the first episode you said you felt like you were a little unprepared,
Oh
and
gosh, I was.
it was.
I wish we could go back and redo that with so much.
I know. I would. I'm just like I'm afraid that our reactions. It's so hard to
Right.
duplicate them in a genuine
Right.
way, or else
Yeah.
I
It
probably
would
would
be.
have tried to redo the first couple, but I just don't really
Yeah.
know how.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, I think we need to keep going with the flow at this point. If people have listened to the first couple and still with us, I think they'll enjoy the new ones more.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of what we do, I think about it too as I'm doing it. I'm kind of rehashing stuff I did last time. So, but it's the same story, so it's hard
Uh-huh.
not to. It's hard not to be
Yeah.
repetitive in that. But
I
oh,
think
I
we've
love
had
how
pretty
Marbury
unique.
does this. You see how she grows here. So, but
Yeah.
this one today, there wasn't much of that.
That's
It
true.
was more dealing with what she's doing here, and our reactions to the world of the wheel type itself.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I didn't go in a reference to the customs of some other country. I normally do that, and some of that's just on the top of my head as we're talking.
Yeah.
Well, as they say in Carheen, that's the straw that broke the camel's back, or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
Yeah, those are
it,
cute. I like the when you do that because I'm never expecting them. They just pop
right.
up and I'm like, oh, that was clever.
Yeah. Yeah. Every now and then I'll have thought one out ahead of time, but or have a thought and kind of which country would I associate with that best. And I didn't do that today. I didn't even think about it. Didn't cross my mind at all. But that's all right. I don't want it to get too old. So
Oh no, I think it's fine.
I,
Um,
and I, I need to break out a map and look at it again because I'm forgetting which countries are where.
oh
And
yeah.
sometimes I'm afraid to say stuff because like, oh no, that country is so far away from what I just described it being.
Well, I think we did a good job with the ones we thought of today. And
Today,
then
yeah.
and we wouldn't be the first podcast to make those kind of goofs and then come back and make a minor correction in the next
Right,
episode. I mean, it's in
right.
all of them I listen to.
Uh-huh.
Even the
I,
more well-established ones. I mean, they do that
yeah.
stuff constantly. We can't remember it all, like all on the
Oh no,
fly, so it's fine.
no. Well, if we studied his world and we'd read these books 10 times, so, then you could handle that a little more smoothly. But we do have lives, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm telling you, some of these people have read that many times that do podcasts, and
Yeah.
they still goof, so it's fine.
Oh well, everybody goofs. I'm used to that. Oh, in a bit, I will send you pictures of my newest knife. I'm a little ashamed of it. Everybody keeps bragging on it, but I,
Yeah.
I put bone handles on one,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the first time I've dealt with bone, and I was being so careful because I've heard it crack so easy. I
Mm-hmm.
still cracked it in 3 places.
Oh, dang.
I mean, I put super glue in them so they won't grow. They're just where they are. But
Mm-hmm.
oh, it was sorry. And then I messed up a little bit on the sanding, and I have to go back and finish it by
Mm.
hand. So,
I wonder
but
if next time there would be a way you could just put some color of some kind in the cracks and it could just look like a design. I don't know.
no,
That
it's
sounds like,
they're small cracks. Anything you do that accentuates it
oh,
makes it worse. So,
yeah, okay.
that's one of the reasons I put the super glue in it. Is otherwise, like the polishing compound and just dirt from use gets in there and it just makes it black, and it makes it real obvious.
Mm.
So yeah, but when I first saw it, a little bit of super glue and let it soak in and then smooth that out. They've sanded it smooth, and so now things can't get in there and
Okay.
black.
Got it.
Mm.
Yeah, I personally have never worked with bone. I'm not really a crafts person
Right,
like
I
that, but it is
understand. Yeah,
interesting, I guess, for you to get a taste of what it's like because you probably read about in a lot of stories, like people have bone tools or stuff made out of bone in a lot of things I read,
yeah,
anyways. And it would just be cool to
yeah,
physically know what that feels like now and what those tools are,
yeah.
how it,
Mm.
it is to craft them.
Oh, well, I'll tell you one thing: bone stinks.
Oh,
I mean, not
yeah.
not on its own, but like when you're sanding it or machining it or filing it
Oh,
down,
yeah.
it stinks. And then the thing that's 10 times worse is horn. I mean, antler
Mm.
is pretty bad. It's a little worse than bone. But horn, like goat horn, rams, I did some ram's horn,
Mm-hmm.
and of course I wound up breaking it entirely. But it it smells like a nasty old goat when you're
Oh,
sanding it,
no.
So
Ugh.
get there and get it all polished and stuff, and so nothing's coming off of it, no dust or anything. But yeah, I have to wear masks or respirators when I'm working with it,
Mhm.
the
Oof.
bone, the horn, the antler, because little tiny particles of that have real sharp edges, and you're inhaling
Ooh.
it in, and it'll cut your lungs up, cause all kind of problems.
Oh, wow. That's
Um,
very
yeah,
gnarly. Oh my goodness.
that's why I'm glad I read about that, and so I keep different paper masks and a bigger respirator and things like that for when I'm working with those things.
Whoa.
Um, like on this knife, I was just kind of going along the back edge of it, and I'm like, oh, I hate the smell of that bone, and I realized I'm sanding on bone. Let me go get my mask.
Yeah. Oh my
It's
gosh.
like you're so busy because I wasn't just sanding the bone, I was sanding the metal and everything, but it just
Mm.
you kind of forget, hey, some of that's in with it. I'm like, God, this stuff stinks. Get your mask, dummy. And so I did, and it worked. But, oh, it's that's fun stuff. I,
Wow. I
I
wished
love I
I had
love doing
done
it. But,
anything that interesting this weekend. I did carve pumpkins earlier today. So
yeah,
at the time of recording, we're still building up to Halloween.
yeah, yeah. Do you expect
So
trick or treaters there in the apartments and all?
yeah, there are lots of kids that live in this complex, and the office said you just leave your light on. I think you leave your porch light
Okay,
on if you want kids to
yeah.
come up.
So
So
I didn't know if they would bother coming up the stairs or not, or if you
I'm
sit at the
not
bottom of the
sure. Well,
stairs.
I think there's a kid next door and maybe some
Okay,
downstairs. So they might. I don't know.
yeah,
We got
right,
some pumpkins to put out
yeah,
either way to make it look like we're available, and I'll
yeah,
pick up some candy on the way home from work
yeah,
at some point soon.
yeah.
But
Oh,
yeah,
so
I had a
you
good time carving
good.
pumpkins and hanging
Mm,
out with my friends who have a 4-year-old.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so we had a good time with them. And the only other thing I've made this weekend is a stew
Mm,
that I've made with some kind of Indian inspired spices. The most important
hmm,
part of it is the chickpeas, and I've got English
yeah, yeah.
peas and parsnips and kale, and
Mm,
I've got it
oh,
all flavored with nutmeg and ground ginger and black pepper and a curry powder that's got
oh,
cumin and coriander and turmeric, probably a couple other
yeah.
things,
Now, I
and
was
then a
supposed to have
whole
to have turmeric in it.
yeah, yep, totally, it would. I need to harvest my turmeric. Speaking of, it's about ready. I just haven't gone out there and dug it up. But and I just put a whole bunch of habanero powder in the soup too, because
Oh,
I'm now
wow.
so jaded with cayenne pepper, it doesn't really burn
Yeah.
anymore. So now I put habanero on everything.
Gosh, you kill me. You and both just kill me. I mean, can stand foods harder than I can. He just doesn't like them that much. But
Yeah,
I do not understand y'all.
I keep leveling up.
Yeah, it's exactly. You're ready to face your boss battle soon.
Yeah.
Oh, how funny. That's good. Send us pictures of the pumpkins when you would. Yeah, that'd be
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. Tonight we'll
Uh,
put the little tea lights in them and see how they look.
yeah.
He messed his up. His was like a circle that had a bat in the middle of it, but he forgot and like cut out the whole bat. So now he made the circle a mouth, and there were some
Yeah.
like clouds in the pattern, and he made those like really wonky looking eyes.
Oh,
And the
okay.
kid we were hanging out with just kept laughing at the eyes. It was a
Yeah.
good time. But it ended up looking good. It still looks like a weird jack-o'-lantern anyway. Like it looks like
Yeah.
that was what the
Yeah.
pattern was supposed to be.
It just wasn't what it started out as. But so y'all are artistic. Y'all can do things like that. You know.
I guess.
Mine, I'm just glad mine has more teeth than her neighbors. You
Oh man.
know. Oh, so good deal. Well, tell I said hey,
Yeah,
and
will do.
I guess I'll let you go. And
Yeah,
love
love
you,
you.
baby. You take care. Love you. Talk to you
Bye.
later.
Love you too.
Mhm.